The story begins on a stormy night. Rain pours down as a man kneels on the ground, his hand pressed against the wet earth. A woman stands before him, a sword buried deep in his chest. He tells her to end it, to twist the blade if she truly wants him gone. Their eyes meet for a moment before she tightens her grip and turns the sword. Blood spills from his mouth, but he doesn't resist. Instead, he lifts his trembling hand, a faint smile on his lips. He murmurs something about how distant and untouchable she has always been. As his strength fades, his hand falls away, leaving a blood-stained mark on her cheek. She takes a step back, watching as life leaves his body. His final words are bitter, cursing her as he dies. A glowing message suddenly appears. Engagement breaking. Complete. The requirement for this outcome? The death of Desalane von Greyhound Uklein. The scene shifts to a different setting. A man watching the screen lets out a relieved sigh, mumbling about how long it took to fix that annoying bug. The status window confirms it. No more glitches. The game is finally running as intended. This is Kim Woo-jin, a game developer working at Rue, a company that seemingly came out of nowhere but quickly became famous for its high-quality games. In the struggling console game market of Korea, Rue's rapid success surprised everyone. Their latest project is their most ambitious yet. A massive title with an evolving story where player choices shape the world and difficulty. The game's appeal lies in its deep narrative and intelligent AI characters, making even a single-player experience feel dynamic. Players can take on various roles, king, noble, devil hunter, and more, allowing for limitless possibilities. If this game succeeds, the company will thrive, but failure means ruin. Woo-jin has spent months fixing bugs, but the biggest headache was always the same character, Desalane. As a mid-boss and a key antagonist, his story roots were complex, filled with countless variables that caused endless glitches. Tonight, after all his struggles, Woo-jin finally managed to get through the engagement-breaking route without any issues. Desalane's fate was sealed, killed by his own fiancée, a fitting end considering the chaos he caused throughout the episode. Just as he takes a moment to relax, a voice calls out to him. A woman approaches, asking about the test results. This is Yuara, his team leader, and his ex-girlfriend. They were together for 7 years, sharing both good and difficult times. She was ambitious, always striving for improvement, while he preferred a laid-back approach to life. Her determination helped him land this job, pushing him to be better. But in the end, their differences pulled them apart. She tells him she heard about the trouble he had with the bugs and is glad he managed to push through. Woo-jin simply nods, feeling the exhaustion settle in after another long night of work. Woo-jin reflects on the fact that it's been 6 months since his breakup with Yuara. He's heard rumors that she's seeing someone new, and judging by how things seem, it looks like the relationship is going well. When he casually brings it up, she seems a little surprised but acknowledges that word travels fast in the company. She confirms the rumor and says things are fine. Woo-jin, feeling a little frustrated, comments on it before sarcastically wishing her success in taking things to the next level. She brushes him off, telling him to stop being petty and focus on work. Switching the topic, she mentions that the writer has made more changes, requiring adjustments to some character models. Woo-jin sighs. New changes happen almost every day. Speaking of characters, he wonders if Desalane is really just a mid-boss, considering that lucky players can take him down early in the game. Yuara explains that Desalane's strength grows as the story progresses, making the game harder depending on player choices. That unpredictability is part of the game's appeal. Then, she casually points out something unexpected. Desalane's character design is actually based on Woo-jin himself. He's confused, but she laughs, saying it should have been obvious while working on the model. After all, they both have the same over-the-top appearance. Woo-jin insists that he barely interacted with the writer, so there's no way that's true. Yuara teases him, saying that's why she always makes sure to kill Desalane first when she plays. He jokingly asks if she's picking a fight, but she continues, saying their personalities are also similar. Woo-jin refuses to believe he has anything in common with someone whose last words are an insult. Shifting back to work, Yuara asks for his thoughts on the playtest. Woo-jin admits the game is fun but worries about the company's future relying entirely on its success. She reassures him, reminding him that the gameplay trailer has already generated worldwide excitement. There's no way it will flop. Just then, Woojin notices something and points it out to her. Her boyfriend is waiting nearby. She seems surprised, thinking it's too late for that, but sure enough, a man stands next to his car, checking his phone. Woojin tells her she shouldn't keep him waiting and urges her to go. She agrees, says goodbye, and leaves. Woojin watches her go, feeling a mix of emotions before turning his attention back to work. As he resumes checking Dekalane's profile, Woojin rereads the character's traits and questions how the writer could have possibly based them on him. Dekalane was once praised as a genius in magic, but in reality he was just average. His noble upbringing and inflated pride turned him into an unbearable person, making him universally hated despite his growing strength throughout the story. Woojin starts considering whether he should tweak the character's traits. Since Dekalane is supposedly modeled after him, maybe he should add some qualities that make him more sympathetic. He adds things like understanding to soften his personality. Then he gets carried away, adding more skills: wealthy magnate, Midas touch, sharp eyesight, and iron body. Only after he's done does he realize he went overboard. He had planned to make small changes, but instead he added an entire list of enhancements. Realizing he needs to undo the modifications before anyone notices, he quickly moves to restore Dekalane to his original state. Before he can fix it, a sudden notification startles him. Someone is messaging him this late at night. Checking his screen, he sees that it's developer Rain, the scriptwriter. They ask if he's still working, and Woojin replies that he is. Assuming it's about another model update, he tells them to just say the word and he'll take care of it immediately. Rain clarifies that they aren't here for any particular reason, just to watch. Woojin doesn't understand what they mean, wondering if they plan to check for bugs together. Before he can ask more, a sudden window appears, making Rain laugh. Confused, Woojin questions what there is to see, but then he notices something strange. A massive hole has opened in the sky, surrounded by swirling lightning. As the lightning intensifies, flashing violently, Woojin is caught off guard. He struggles to comprehend what's happening and why such a phenomenon exists in the first place. Before he can react, a powerful bolt strikes down, hitting him directly. Pain, unlike anything he's ever felt, spreads through his body as his consciousness begins to fade. In his final moments, he wonders where he is and who the vague figures he's seeing might be. A voice echoes in the darkness, warning someone to always be on guard. The speaker insists that Dekalane is not an easy man to kill. Though he may seem weak now, he could rise again at any moment. He is a villain through and through, one who always finds a way to balance his own abilities. The next thing Woojin hears is a sharp voice yelling at him to wake up. Someone is demanding that Dekalane get up immediately. When he finally opens his eyes, a woman is standing over him, scolding him for lying around and calling himself human. Woojin, still disoriented, takes a moment to process his situation. It has been a few days since he found himself in this body, yet it still feels surreal. The woman, clearly frustrated, demands to know how much longer he plans to isolate himself over a single woman. She accuses him of tarnishing their family's reputation. She tosses some papers onto the floor, warning him that if he doesn't want to lose the professor position he values so much, he needs to start working. Woojin, now coming to terms with his reality, recalls the bizarre event that happened just a week ago. The night sky had undergone a strange transformation, and when he woke up, he was in an unfamiliar place, inhabiting an unfamiliar body. Everything around him feels oddly familiar, confirming his growing suspicion he has somehow ended up inside the very game he was developing. And worse, he isn't just any character. He has become Dekalane, a villain doomed to die no matter which path the story takes. Lying in bed, Woojin. Now Dekalane looks completely drained. At first, he believed this was all just a dream. But as days passed, the undeniable sensation of being alive forced him to accept this as reality. Maybe this is the afterlife, a twisted continuation after his death from that lightning strike. One thing, however, is absolutely certain. He is now the villain of the unfinished game, he spent countless hours working on, and his fate is sealed. Decalane is an enemy to nearly everyone in this world, the catalyst for many major events, and a character designed to die. Out of all the possible bodies he could have ended up in, why did it have to be this one? The biggest problem is that he has no idea what stage of the story he has entered. His only clue is the amount of mana he possesses, but without knowing how to use it, he is completely powerless. Worse still, he knows from experience that Decalane's survival rate is practically non-existent. During development, the team tested every possible route over 1,000 times, and Decalane survived in only one scenario. Looking over the papers the woman left behind, he sees a document mentioning the Imperial University and his role as a senior professor. The woman, he realizes, is Euclian, his half-sister. She is the true authority of the Euclian family, overseeing everything in his absence. Their relationship is strained at best. There is also a mention of another name, Uli. Woojin, now fully aware of his situation, suspects there is something deeper happening between Decalane and Uli, though he isn't sure what it is yet. Uriel left in frustration, dropping a stack of documents before storming out. She made it clear, if he wanted to keep his position as a professor, he had to start working. Today happened to be the day of the lecture, and Decalane sighed, realizing he had no choice but to go. He had never given a lecture in his life, but he needed to gather as much information as possible. More importantly, a status window had appeared, listing survival objectives. His primary goal was to become essential to the game, and his first side quest, giving the university lecture, would reward him with 0.5 store credit. It wasn't much, but even that was valuable, and he knew he couldn't afford to ignore it. Uriel was one of the many variables that could lead to his downfall, so playing along was his best option. Fortunately, he wasn't too concerned about the lecture itself. This body had a special trait, the ability to understand anything as long as he used mana. When designing Decalane's character, he had given him this ability to make him somewhat redeemable. Since this trait only appeared in the later stages of the game, it likely had hidden potential. Looking around his massive bedroom, he took in the luxurious surroundings. The bathroom and clothes felt unfamiliar, yet he could use them with ease. It was almost as if he had always lived as Decalane. His former self would have found the noble attire over the top, but now it felt elegant and comfortable. This shift was due to the body's innate traits: intimidation, dignity, and aesthetic sense. Everything seemed to be reinforcing the fact that this was his new identity. He realized he couldn't go against the habits ingrained in this body. Even things that would have felt unnatural to him before now came effortlessly. Attending his first lecture, though just a means to gather information, felt oddly normal. He was a noble, highly regarded, and influential, yet deep down, he still felt a lingering pressure, because at his core, he was still Woojin. Taking a moment to assess himself, he noted that his new body was objectively tall and handsome. In Aura's words, he was nothing more than a lazy and boring man, and he made sure to remind himself of that fact. Holding on to his true identity would keep him from becoming too complacent. Riding in the expensive car only emphasized how different this world was from his own. He had never even sat in a vehicle this luxurious before. The sheer cost of it made him think of the man he had seen with Aura, which irritated him slightly. As he sat in the car, he noticed another passenger, a young individual whose gender he couldn't immediately determine. They greeted him politely and handed over some papers. He assumed they were his secretary or assistant and wondered if they were a mage. The person reminded him that they had been under his guidance for 3 years. He quickly covered up his confusion by joking about it. Expecting lecture materials, he flipped through the documents, only to find a fully written script for the lecture. The entire lesson was pre-written, from start to finish. It made sense. Decalane was too arrogant and unmotivated to prepare a real lecture himself, so someone else had done the work for him. He thought about praising them for their effort, but just as he was about to speak, something briefly distorted. Instead of his usual dismissive remark, he ended up saying, "Good work." The sudden shift caught his assistant off guard. Even the driver seemed surprised that he was offering praise. A strange discomfort settled in Decalane's stomach, an uneasy knot tightening with each passing moment. He couldn't understand why something as simple as giving praise unsettled him so much. The feeling had started back at the mansion, but now it was even stronger, almost as if his thoughts were being influenced by Decalane's personality. As soon as the car stopped, he stepped out, taking in the grand sight before him. This was Imperial University, his new workplace. The sheer scale and prestige of the institution were undeniable. It was impressive, to say the least. With a clear destination in mind, he made his way to the Rodeo Hall, the lecture venue he had been assigned. Along the way, he overheard students buzzing with excitement. They spoke about how they were finally getting to attend one of his lectures, calling him a prodigy and a genius in spell interpretation. Once inside, he wasted no time, setting his papers down and preparing to start the lesson. As expected, some of the students were mesmerized by his presence, openly admiring his looks, but not everyone was impressed. One girl in particular radiated hostility. She seemed almost disgusted, as if this moment had been long overdue. Her hatred ran deep. She remembered everything, how 3 years ago, her father had spent his life researching spell interpretation, only to have his work stolen. The shock and betrayal had driven him to take his own life. The thief behind it all was now standing right in front of her, celebrated as a genius, basking in undeserved glory. Her father's death had destroyed everything. Their noble status was gone, their house and lands taken away. She had been left with nothing but anger and a vow for revenge. That day, she swore to take everything back, to expose him and ruin him, just as he had ruined her family. But revenge required patience. She knew she couldn't act recklessly. If she wanted to destroy him completely, she needed a perfect plan. Meanwhile, Decalane carried on with the lecture, introducing himself again. He explained that, as a monarch-ranked mage, he had the ability to rule over elements, and he had been assigned as a special lecturer at the university. He briefly covered mage ranking systems before moving on to the fundamentals of magic. Magic, he explained, was divided into 3 main properties and 9 categories. The properties included origin, the foundation of magic, elements, the physical components, and material, which served as the medium. As for categories, there were disciplines such as summoning, destruction, and support. He continued listing them, but even he started tuning himself out. Despite his lack of real knowledge, the lecture was going surprisingly well. It was his first time teaching, yet everything flowed smoothly. Though he was simply reading from a pre-prepared script, his perfect comprehension made it seem effortless. His traits, intimidation and dignity, kept the students completely focused, while his elitism trait prevented him from feeling any pressure. In fact, it all felt natural, as if this role was meant for him. He then shifted the discussion to mana, explaining how its usage varied depending on where it was stored in the body. Mages typically kept their mana in their brains, making it easier to visualize spells, while knights stored theirs in their hearts, allowing energy to circulate through their bodies efficiently. The Dantian served as the most versatile storage for mana, seamlessly connecting internal energy with external forces. The idea was simple. Hard work mattered, but talent alone wasn't enough. Careful focus and selection were just as important. Even for Decalane, this advice was relevant. In reality, he wasn't exceptionally gifted. His mana pool sat at 3,300, yet there were others with over 300. 0. If anyone needed to listen to these words, it was him. But in the end, it was just a script, and he knew it. Wrapping up the lecture, he hesitated on the final section. This part felt off, something the real Decalane wouldn't have said. He debated whether to read it, but ultimately asked if anyone had questions. It was out of character for Decalane, but no one spoke up. Just as he was about to leave, a voice cut through the silence. A student announced that a mysterious spell had appeared in the mage dormitory the night before. Some were even calling it the work of a devil. As the so-called genius of spell interpretation, she demanded to know his thoughts. Instead of answering immediately, Decalane questioned her affiliation with the Mage Tower. She seemed caught off guard, asking why that mattered. He simply pointed out that proper protocol required her to announce her rank before speaking. Without basic manners, he wouldn't accept her question. The remark stunned her, but before she could argue, he dismissed the topic. His mind shifted to something more pressing, his dwindling mana. Just analyzing the lecture had drained 1,300 points, leaving him with only 2,000 out of 3,300. Who knew how much more would be needed to interpret an unknown spell? Laughter spread among the students at the girl's expense. They mocked her failed attempt to stand out. But she wasn't done yet. With a determined expression, she stepped forward, green energy forming around her hands. If the Mage Tower refused to interpret the spell, she would force him to do it. She formally requested an analysis, raising the magic circle into the air. Decalen focused, his mana steadily draining as he examined the spell. Meanwhile, she explained that lower-ranked mages had tried to decipher it all night, but made no progress. She just wanted a hint, anything that could help. But he didn't hesitate. It was barrier magic. The revelation shocked her. He clarified that it belonged to the enchantment category, meant to trap someone inside. No hint was necessary. It was obvious. She stood frozen, unable to process the response. At the same time, a notification appeared, confirming that he had completed a side quest and earned store currency. Later, in the Mage Tower's cafeteria, the same girl was shoving food into her mouth, frustration written all over her face. She cursed him under her breath. Her plan had backfired completely. She had tried to expose his fraudulent knowledge only for him to humiliate her instead. All because she forgot to say her name. The embarrassment was unbearable. But something didn't add up. In his flustered attempt to brush her off, he had classified the spell as enchantment magic. That category usually required a medium. Yet, the magic circle she had shown him was an exact copy of the one found at the dormitory, and it had no medium. How could it be enchantment magic? Her thoughts were interrupted when another student called her name. Aferin. The girl excitedly revealed that after reformulating the spell, they confirmed it was indeed a barrier. Confused, Aferin listened as the girl explained how impressed everyone was by her boldness. Most students had been too intimidated to ask questions, but Aferin had stood her ground. The realization hit hard. Was he right all along? Her stomach sank as her friend thanked her, saying their research report would include her name. Aferin weakly responded, insisting it must have been a lucky guess, but deep down, she knew her plan had backfired, and instead of exposing him, she had only raised his reputation. She reached into her bag and pulled out an advanced textbook, Understanding Elemental Magic, the subject Decalen taught. If she wanted to take him down, she had to know her enemy. There was no turning back now. Meanwhile, Decalen walked down the hallway, relieved that everything hadn't gone horribly wrong. When he looked at the spell earlier, his ability to understand magic activated on its own. Just seeing the complex pattern of lines in the spell drained all of his remaining mana. Despite his efforts, he couldn't grasp its meaning. Even if he had twice the mana, it still wouldn't have been enough to comprehend its principles. At least, nothing serious happened as a result. A voice calls out to him, and he turns to see a woman approaching. This is Yuli, a familiar face to him. She has snow-white hair and clear eyes, a person he has seen countless times before. She greets him and questions how he has been. Yuli is his fiancée, a well-known character who is destined to become a legendary knight. She mentions a promise he made to her a week ago, but he has no idea what she means. Playing along, he pretends not to remember. As he tries to walk past her, she stops him, reminding him of his past actions. The promise was simple. If he admitted his arrogance and deception to the world, she would stand by his side no matter what happened. But since he failed to keep his word, she tells him that he may leave. Though he hesitates for a moment, he ultimately walks away without a response. Yuli watches him leave, frustrated and angry. Their engagement was arranged for political reasons, meant to unite two powerful families, she accepted it as a duty, even without love. However, when it became clear that his so-called talents were a lie, both families remained silent to avoid scandal. But she could not tolerate deception. As a knight, she values honesty above all else. She had once felt hopeful when he agreed to confess the truth, but now she realizes he has no intention of keeping his promise. Her frustration grows as she reflects on his betrayal. The scene shifts to the Magic Tower. He explains that the Imperial University is the most prestigious institution in this world, and its magic department is the best of all. It is comparable to the top universities in his previous life, with the Magic Tower acting like an elite research facility. As he walks through the campus, he admires its vast size and well-maintained gardens. The familiar design reminds him of the time he and his team spent crafting this world. However, experiencing it firsthand in another person's body is not what he expected. Suddenly, he hears hurried footsteps behind him and instinctively reacts, elbowing the person rushing toward him. The boy stumbles, dropping everything he was carrying. Apologizing, the boy explains that he was in a hurry to meet his professor. Recognizing the student, he makes a small joke, but the boy doesn't understand it. Introducing himself as Alan, the student explains the reason for his urgency. Later, in Decalane's office, Alan presents a document, this year's sponsorship list for new mages. Decalane compares the Magic Tower to real-world research institutions, where funding is essential for progress. Professors sponsor promising new mages, selecting those they believe have potential. While reviewing the sponsorship list, one name stands out to him. The golden glow around it hints at his own attribute: wealthy magnate. His ability, described as an exceptional talent for finance and an instinct for valuable opportunities, allows him to visually perceive attributes related to wealth and potential. He assumes that the person behind this glowing name will generate significant financial benefits. There are several others with similar markings, but the brightest among them belongs to Aferin Luna. Aferin is a key character in the game, and according to its lore, she lost her father to Decalane. However, she has received no sponsorships. When Decalane asks Alan about it, the response is simple. Everyone fears getting involved. No one wants to risk the consequences of supporting her. Despite this, Aferin is highly skilled, having gained entry to the Magic Tower without attending the academy. She is his enemy, or rather, he is hers. If events unfold as they did in the game, she will eventually be the one to end his life. In every scenario, Decalane meets his demise in countless ways. This is due to a trait shared by all villains: villain's fate. The world itself conspires to bring about his downfall. He has been killed by swords, magic, poison, and even large-scale attacks. No matter the method, his fate remains unchanged. If he wants to survive, he must make a different choice, one that the original Decalane never would have considered. He quickly finalizes his decisions, signing documents and handing them to Alan for submission. Before leaving, Alan reminds him to borrow books, which he plans to read before heading home. Left alone in his office, Decalane contemplates his situation. To stay alive, he needs a vast amount of money. Many of the death scenarios in the game can be avoided with enough financial resources. Sponsoring a mage is a step in the right direction, but it isn't enough. Numerous named characters in this world despise him, and they will seize any opportunity to eliminate him. The only way to counter this threat is to become so powerful that they can no longer oppose him. However, achieving strength is not simple. His natural talent is only average, and at his current level he cannot withstand future challenges. To change his fate, he must be fully prepared. He does have one advantage: his attributes. Decalane cannot wield all four elements as he claims, but he does have talent in manipulating earth and fire. By combining earth, fire, and metal, he gains access to another ability, minus touch. This skill consumes mana to unlock hidden potential in a target. Additionally, his connection to metal allows him to use the Flying Mind Sword. Despite its grand name, the Flying Mind Sword is just telekinesis. However, this ability is not commonly used in this world. To make up for his lack of raw power, he turns to the study of manipulation magic. Mastering this will allow him to control objects at will, giving him an edge in battle. Determined to test his abilities, he places his hand on a book. A faint blue glow surrounds his fingers as he focuses. Suddenly, words lift from the pages, forming a large magic circle above him. The symbols spin rapidly, and he realizes that the knowledge of basic manipulation spells is being absorbed directly into his mind. Sweat drips down his face, and his breathing is heavy. He focuses on his pen, convinced that he can make it move. As it rises into the air, he realizes he has successfully learned telekinesis. The ability is now ingrained in him, allowing him to use it without needing to chant a spell. It feels strange to experience something he had only read about in character descriptions. Though the skill is still at a basic level, the potential is clear. If he masters advanced telekinesis, he could reach the level of strength he desires. He considers his next step. Glancing at the books, a thought crosses his mind. What if he engraves the entire magic circle onto his body? In this world, larger magic circles result in greater power. To maximize his telekinesis, he must fully integrate the magic circle into his entire body rather than limiting it to his brain and heart. There are obvious risks, but thanks to his iron body attribute, his enhanced physical abilities should help him endure the effects. Since he still has around 800 mana left, he decides to test it. As he activates the magic, blue energy flows through him. However, the process is far more painful than expected. His bones crack, his muscles tear, and an unbearable agony spreads throughout his body. Despite the excruciating pain, he maintains his composure, refusing to show weakness. When the pain finally subsides, his hands tremble from exhaustion. He has only one mana point left and realizes that he failed due to insufficient energy. However, there is progress. A magic circle is now engraved on his shoulder. At this pace, covering his entire body will take about 2 weeks. A month passes, and the first day of classes at the Magic Tower begins. The students notice that something feels different compared to what they had heard from older students. Instead of a long lecture, D. Kalane's instructions simply tell them to demonstrate their abilities, using any elemental magic. Many are confused about what he is trying to measure, especially since he is nowhere to be seen. Aferin is frustrated, believing this approach is irresponsible. She can't believe that their first lecture has been reduced to self-study. Left with only a sign as guidance, she wonders what kind of person D. Kalane truly is. As she vents her frustration, someone bumps into her. Annoyed, she turns to confront them but stops in surprise when she recognizes Sylvia von Jose Penelade. However, Sylvia simply glances at her and walks away without a reaction. Aferin is left wondering if Sylvia even knows who she is. Later, Aferin focuses on her magic, shaping rocks into a small structure. However, she suddenly feels her mana being drawn away. Looking around, she is startled to see Sylvia constructing an even larger stone formation right beside her. Aferin quickly realizes what happened. Her magic was absorbed and used for Sylvia's structure. Shocked and irritated, she questions what Sylvia is doing, but her words are ignored. Aferin's frustration grew. She demanded to know why Sylvia was ignoring her, but then realization struck. There was no way Sylvia didn't recognize her. She was the one who had threatened Aferin's family and forced her to abandon magic. Now that she had returned, perhaps Sylvia feared she would catch up and surpass her. Sylvia's response was cold. She claimed not to know who Aferin was, but acknowledged her father, calling him a negligent noble who had died. Rage bubbled inside Aferin. The surrounding students sensed the tension, some even jokingly chanting "World Star" as if a fight was about to break out. Before anyone could stop her, Aferin launched herself through the air, preparing an attack, demanding Sylvia take back her words. Sylvia hastily put up a barrier, but the explosion that followed was massive. Some students screamed, asking if anyone was hurt, trying to grasp what had just happened. When the dust settled, Aferin was holding Sylvia by the hair, demanding she repeat herself. But then a strange energy filled the air. The students turned in fear, whispering about a purple aura. Aferin recognized it instantly. It was a void, created when her mana clashed with Sylvia's, sucking in everything around it indiscriminately. Panic spread. If the void exploded, metal fragments would burst out like bullets, killing everyone nearby. The students ran, but Aferin knew there was no escaping it. Just as the explosion became inevitable, a deafening silence filled the air. She opened her eyes to find D. Kalain standing before them, the fragments frozen in mid-air, suspended by his telekinesis. The students were in awe. Though still learners, they couldn't help but admire the sheer beauty of magic unfolding before them. Kulain gathered the fragments into a mass and addressed the students. The lecture was over. Everyone except those responsible for the commotion was dismissed. Aferin felt a chill of panic. She was in serious trouble. The scene shifted to an interrogation room. Aferin realized she was about to be held accountable, possibly for a grave offense. A man entered the room, greeting the chairwoman and Kalain. He was Relin, a professor specializing in support studies. Another professor, Retlen, followed, focusing on spirit studies. The chairwoman, Adeline Segalian, welcomed them, apologizing for the sudden meeting, but relieved they arrived quickly. Relin wasted no time. He demanded to know who had dared lay a hand on a lady of House Aladay. Other professors muttered about how frustrating it was dealing with low-born troublemakers. The odds were stacked against Aferin. Relin praised Kulain for handling the situation before it got worse, and Retlen agreed, calling it impressive. Kulain, however, saw through their flattery. These professors were politically skilled, meaning the outcome of this disciplinary hearing was already decided. Sylvia, a noble's daughter, would be protected, while Aferin, a fallen noble now considered a commoner, had no chance of a fair trial. But Kulain had noticed something earlier. The scarlet energy surrounding Aferin. Only he could see it due to his sharp eyesight, and he recognized it as the mark of a villain's fate beginning to manifest within her. If he couldn't change the outcome of this trial, his own fate might take a dangerous turn as well. The hearing began. The intercom announced the disciplinary meeting between the two debutante mages. The accusation was clear, causing conflict within the school halls and endangering lives. When asked why she fought, Aferin remained silent. She knew Sylvia had insulted her father and provoked her, but she couldn't say it, not in front of her enemies. Relin scoffed, accusing Aferin of an inferiority complex. He reminded her that nobles and commoners were not equals. He then turned to Sylvia, who claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that she had accidentally destroyed Aferin's work, which led to an argument. With that, Relin declared Aferin the aggressor, dismissing any justification she might have had. Talks of expulsion began. The injustice stung. Aferin shivered as insults were thrown at her, and there was no one left to protect her. Her father was gone. Her rage swelled. This was all Kulain's fault. If not for him, none of this would have happened. Adeline, sensing the meeting had reached its conclusion, turned to Kulain. As someone present at the scene and a member of the disciplinary committee, she wanted to hear his thoughts before finalizing their decision. Kulain, knowing what was at stake, prepared to speak. As Aferin thinks the situation is over, D. Kulain shifts the focus unexpectedly. Instead of addressing her, he questions Sylvia, asking if she truly believes she had no part in what happened. This catches both of them off guard, as well as the other professors. He continues, pointing out that Sylvia could have prevented the incident but chose not to. Whether it was a lack of ability or a deliberate decision, the outcome remained the same. Sylvia hesitates before admitting that she didn't stop the attack because she wanted Aferin to get into more trouble. Aferin is stunned by this turn of events. It was clear she was the one at fault, so why is D. Kulain directing the discussion towards Sylvia instead? One of the professors argues that the blame lies with the attacker, not the defender. But D. Kulain counters, saying that if they truly want to assign blame based on context, then he, as the lecturer, should take responsibility. This immediately silences the argument. Aferin watches, confused. He's even challenging the professor who is siding with Sylvia. Why is he going so far to defend her? She doesn't know how to feel about it. The chairwoman, Adeline, finally puts an end to the debate, stating that conflicts like these are part of growing up. Since they are still young debutantes, there is no need for harsh disciplinary action. She dismisses the case, allowing both to leave without punishment. Ephraim, who had fully expected to be expelled, is left in disbelief. This isn't the Decalain she remembers. He would have never let her off so easily. As they start to leave, one of the professors commends Decalain for his way of handling the situation, praising his insight and fairness toward students. Before the conversation can continue, Ephraim suddenly calls out to Decalain. When he turns, she stands there with trembling hands, barely able to see him clearly through her blurred vision. She asks if he remembers the name Luna, if he knows her father, the man who spent his entire life suffering under him before taking his own. But then doubt creeps in. If he does remember, what if he changes his mind to protect himself? And if he doesn't remember at all? Wouldn't that be even more devastating? Before she can dwell on it further, he responds. He tells her there's no need to ask. She shouldn't waste her potential dwelling on the past. As he walks away, she remains frozen, realization sinking in. He does remember. If he didn't, there would have been no reason for him to step in. He must have felt responsible in some way and decided to help her. But then another thought creeps in. Was it just pity? Despite her doubts, she can't hold back her tears. It's a relief to know she hasn't been forgotten. If he still remembers her, that's enough for now. Meanwhile, he gains 2 store currency from the encounter. On the way home, Sylvia's father listens as she explains what happened. He reassures her that she doesn't need to worry about that girl anymore. Here, we are introduced to Giltian von Ludwigeleder, an Esper mage, though his exact level remains unclear. He acknowledges that Ephraim has talent, but her time has passed. This makes Sylvia reflect on the past, remembering the day she first met Ephraim, 10 years ago, during the aptitude exam for academy admission. That day, the mage conducting the test was stunned. It was unheard of. 2 children from the same region possessing the potential to become archmages. Such a coincidence was nearly impossible. As Sylvia and Ephraim locked eyes, they both understood the weight of their abilities. In the world of magic, the highest rank one can reach is the Eternal, a level beyond even the Emperor's authority. Those who reach this status are called archmages, their names carved into history. However, tradition dictates that only 3 archmages can exist at any given time, regardless of their specialization. At that moment, only 1 seat was filled, belonging to Damakin. 2 remained open, though 1 was likely reserved for Adeline, the chairman of the Magic Tower. That left only 1 final spot, a seat that both Sylvia, the heir of the Allied family, and Ephraim, a member of a lesser branch, would have to compete for. Sylvia understood this even before her father explained. She recalled the moment when Gilton told Ephraim's father, Keegan, that his daughter should give up on the entrance exam. That day, the truth became clear. Her family crushed the Luna family's hopes, all for her sake. It was done to ensure that she, not Ephraim, would become the next Archmage. And for Sylvia, this wasn't just her goal, it was her destiny. Still, a lingering frustration remains. Is she truly afraid that Ephraim will catch up? She pushes the thought aside, telling herself it was just a matter of bad luck. Giltheon shifts the conversation, telling her to stop worrying about Ephraim. Instead, she should focus on Decalain. Sylvia questions why, and he explains that Culain is not an ordinary man. Though he may seem stagnant now, he was once considered a genius. If given the chance, he could rise to greatness again. Sylvia already suspected something about him. During the explosion incident, she had made sure Ephraim's mana disappeared. The trap was set so that the moment it came into contact with Ephraim's magic, it would trigger. If things had escalated further, Ephraim would have been in even bigger trouble. Yet Decalain saw through it immediately. She had checked for any traces of magical surveillance beforehand and found none, yet he still managed to uncover the truth. Instead of directly accusing her, he made them settle on a compromise. That wasn't mercy. It was a warning. He knew exactly what she had done, and by forcing her to accept the outcome, he made sure she understood. She had assumed he was nothing more than an arrogant man with slightly above average talent. But now, she isn't so sure. Just who is he really? A few days later, at Decalane's manor, his driver, Roy, arrives and announces that everything is ready. Decalane takes his time before coming down. Once he does, he gets into the carriage, feeling satisfied with his decision to support Aferin. By doing so, he removed a major risk and earned more store currency in the process. He hadn't expected her to be the one who asked that question, and he knows Sylvia might resent him for what happened. But he had no choice. He had to deal with the problem right in front of him. As for social gatherings, he usually prefers to avoid them, but he can't ignore an easy opportunity to earn more store credits. A new side quest appears, attending the New Year's Flower Festival. Completing it would earn him another half a store credit. He still needs to spend 5 credits to unlock the shop, so he figures it's worth checking out any important figures at the event. When the carriage stops, he steps inside the venue, where a large crowd welcomes him. The room is filled with nobles, most of them from high-ranking families. Many of them are people he recognizes, including Yahello, the very person he once tried to model himself after. Coming here was definitely the right call. One of the guests spots him and bursts into laughter, glad to see him. The man eagerly mentions that his son is in Decalane's class. Immediately other guests rush in, eager to introduce themselves. They've been waiting for a chance to meet him. At that moment, Decalane regrets his decision. He hadn't expected this much attention. His thoughts are interrupted when he overhears someone mention the name Ganesha, referencing her achievements in the Continental Journal. That name catches his interest. Annoyed by the nobles crowding him, he waves them off, focusing on his real objective. If he can meet Ganesha, someone who will play a major role in future events, it would be a valuable connection. He scans the area, certain that she's nearby. Sure enough, from the second floor, she watches him with an unreadable expression. She doesn't look pleased. Ganesha is one of the strongest figures early in the story, ranking 5th in terms of power. Her appearance, rough and commanding, gives off the vibe of a seasoned pirate. Decalane is sure she's somewhere close. When he turns, he spots her standing above him. Her distinctive outfit confirms her identity. This is his chance, and he needs to act fast. But before he can make a move, someone else calls his name. Yahello? Decalane curses his timing. Yahello is formally introduced as an Imperial exclusive mage, ranked at the Monarch level, the 4th highest tier of magic users. He greets Decalane with a smirk, pretending to be honored that someone like him remembers their past. He brings up rumors about Decalane's research, implying that his work hasn't progressed in years and that some doubt his abilities. Decalane knows this is nothing more than provocation. The two were once close during their university days, but everything changed when Decalane secured the head professor position. Ever since then, Yahello has harbored resentment. The original Decalane might have been bothered by this, but to him, these taunts are pointless. Besides, there's some truth to the rumors. However, as he glances to his right, he realizes with frustration that Ganesha is gone. Yahello adds one last remark, saying that acting arrogant will only make people dislike him. Decalane barely listens. The real frustration isn't Yahello's words, it's the fact that he just lost his chance to meet Ganesha because of this meaningless conversation. Annoyed, he steps closer to Yahello, making it clear that he's had enough. With a sharp glare, he cuts him off and tells him to leave, calling him exactly what he deserves. Yahello erupts in anger, demanding to know what was just said, but Decalane doesn't have time for him. His priority is finding Ganesha before she leaves the event and securing a connection with her. Unfortunately, his plan quickly falls apart. Inside the hall, people start wondering where he disappeared to. He sighs, realizing that even after dealing with Yahello, too many people are still clinging to him. This is exactly why he avoids social gatherings. Before he can think of a way to escape unnoticed, a woman calls his name. Turning to his right, he finds himself face to face with Ganesh. She immediately questions whether their meeting is a coincidence or if he's been looking for her. He hadn't expected to run into her so soon. But what surprises him more is the feeling that they already have some kind of history. He brushes off the question, saying he just got lost, but she doesn't buy it. She knows he's here for a reason and assumes he has something to say. Before he can respond, she brings up an old mission, apologizing for how things turned out. She reminds him that she returned his advance payment along with the cancellation fee, hoping he can forgive her. It becomes clear that their past interactions were based on some kind of commission. She specifically mentions a child with magic talent, saying that she couldn't go through with handing them over because she grew too attached. He starts to piece things together. Apparently the original D. Kalain had been trying to make up for his own shortcomings by acquiring a gifted child. Then Ganesha asks him a question that catches him off guard. She wants to know how long he plans to keep living this way. Her words make him think. Before possessing this body, the original D. Kalain had been easily swayed by empty flattery, breaking trust and hurting others in his pursuit of fame. But he refuses to follow the same path. He will live differently. Ganesha is visibly surprised. She had assumed he would try to kill her, given that she once accepted a classified mission and then abandoned it. However, he dismisses that thought, saying it's unnecessary. Truthfully, if D. Kalain truly wanted to eliminate her, he'd only be inviting his own death. He doesn't know what the original D. Kalain was thinking, but he does know that Ganesha is someone who could kill a person with nothing but a strand of her hair. Her abilities, an unbreakable body, and mastery of all martial arts make her a nearly invincible fighter. If an assassin had been sent after her, she would have handled it already. Either way, he has no more reason to stay here. His goal of building connections has already been met. He tells her he's leaving, and that she shouldn't worry about things that won't happen. She watches him go, confused by his lack of concern. She asks if he's sure about leaving, hinting at the possibility of assassination attempts or worse. He simply replies that such actions are beneath a noble and walks away, leaving her stunned. As he exits, he reflects on what she said about the power of the Eucline family. If he wanted, he could pressure her through the Adventurers Guild, but doing so would likely accelerate his own downfall. Then, something unexpected happens. A notification appears he has gained a store currency. He's caught off guard. Earlier, the system had marked a death variable as overcome, but now it says avoided. He hadn't even realized that conversation could have led to his death. This only confirms that danger is lurking everywhere, even in casual encounters. Meanwhile, in another part of the venue, a girl named Rayleigh, an adventurer and a relative of Yuli, turns to her and asks how much longer she plans to stay. Yuli, clearly uninterested, mutters that she never wanted to be here in the first place. Rayleigh, sighing, tells her to stop complaining. Changing the topic, Rayleigh suddenly brings up Yuli's fiancé, asking how things are going with him. The question startles Yuli, and she demands to know what Rayleigh is talking about. Rayleigh explains that she's heard many rumors about their relationship and is concerned. Yuli recalls their last meeting, which didn't end well. She admits that, as expected, things are not going well between them. Rayleigh advises Yuli to lower her voice, but Yuli turns her attention to the sound of approaching footsteps. She notices D. Kalain coming down the stairs, his gaze briefly landing on her before turning away. His sudden departure catches everyone's attention. Known for enjoying social events, his early exit fuels speculation. Some wonder if he's avoiding Yuli, reinforcing rumors of tension between them. His early departure from the gathering leads to talk that he left due to conflict with Yuli, though Woojin remains unaware of this. However, his attendance at the event earns him half a store credit, bringing him closer to the 5 credits needed to unlock the shop. A week passes since the event. During this time, aside from his daily memorization and telekinesis training, he focuses on improving his weak stamina. The decision comes after a near-death experience from attempting something reckless. Days earlier, he had tried engraving additional magic circles onto his body, an excruciating process that left him coughing up blood. A normal mage wouldn't have survived, but his iron body attribute kept him alive. His recent encounter with Ganesha fueled his desire for strength, so he added fire control to his existing telekinesis. This engraving process strengthens his metal manipulation by embedding magic at its core, reducing the time required to learn spells. However, the risk is extreme, putting a heavy strain on his body. Recognizing this, he begins training regularly. One morning, after completing an intense workout, he sighs, drenched in sweat, before heading to work. In his office, Alan hands him a document, a notice from the Magic Tower. The Professor Qualification Committee has scheduled an audit hearing in 6 months to review his research progress. Until then, he must prepare the necessary documents. Realizing the implications, he understands that his research had likely stalled long before he took over this body. Losing his professor title would jeopardize his chances of returning to his original world. Determined to find answers, he heads to his laboratory. Upon entering, he finds the lab in complete disarray, as if abandoned for a long time. If D. Cullen had been actively working, it wouldn't be in this state. Scanning the room, he notices a suspicious pile of debris, possibly hiding something important. As he clears it, he discovers a slime covering an old book. Using telekinesis, he retrieves the book, peeling off the mess. He notices that past research had been inscribed in a way to prevent theft, but much of it remains useless. Then, his understanding skill activates, emitting a golden light around him. The brightness confirms that the research holds incredible value. As he examines it, he realizes the research is incomplete. Some sections are missing, and others contain flawed logic. Yet, the depth of knowledge is enough to trigger his abilities. Among the clutter, he finds a locket containing a picture of a young Epherian and her father, though the image of her father is damaged. It becomes clear that Epherian's father, once a researcher under D. Cullen, had desperately tried to conceal something. The long-standing resentment that the Lunar family holds toward D. Cullen now makes sense. His actions had caused Epherian a harsh and unforgiving life. Closing the locket, he vows to complete the research using his understanding skill. If successful, he decides to credit Keegan as a co-author alongside himself. He knows he needs achievements, but he won't take all the credit alone. Later, at the campus cafe, he prepares for what comes next. A girl loudly claims that commoners need to stick together, especially since there are only 30 of them in class. She tries to convince Epherian, saying they need to support each other, but Epherian dismisses it. She used to be a noble, but she has no land or status anymore, so she doesn't see herself that way. The others insist that Epherian is one of them, pointing out that she was also a victim of Sylvia. They believe she should take a stand for commoners. Another girl mentions that starting a club requires a professor's approval, and none of the faculty members would likely support them. They throw out names, rejecting each one, until someone mentions D. Cullen, immediately dismissing the idea, thinking there's no way he would agree. While the discussion continues, Epherian focuses on snacks, hoping they won't actually need his approval. But then, someone suggests that she should be the one to ask D. Cullen. They argue that he treats nobles and commoners the same, and that she even avoided punishment because of him. Epherian doesn't believe he's a good person, and doesn't want to be involved with him. She tries to run away, but Julia, one of the girls, suddenly freezes in fear. Confused, Epherian turns and finds herself face to face with D. Cullen. Julia quickly retreats, leaving Epherian alone. She hesitates, but ultimately hands him the club request, bowing slightly as she explains. She assumes he wouldn't approve of a club for commoners, but figures it's better to try than be pestered about it constantly. To her surprise, he signs the paper without hesitation and tells her to send more details to his office. As he walks away, Epherian is stunned that he agreed so easily. Julia rushes out, shocked that she actually got his signature. Epherian is just as confused, thinking back to the disciplinary committee. She wonders why he's being so cooperative. Later, during a lecture, D. Cullen explains the nature of pure elements and how they form the basis of magic. While he speaks, Epherian's mind is elsewhere. She considers whether he's acting out of guilt or sympathy. After all, he played a role in her father's downfall. Even if he treats her well now, it feels meaningless. If he truly regretted his actions, he should admit them to the world. Her frustration grows, and she clenches her fists. Julia notices her distress and checks on her, but Epherian brushes it off. Then she notices Sylvia and her friends, glaring at her, whispering insults. She realizes she has made enemies among the nobles, despite once being one herself. However, she reassures Julia that it's nothing to worry about, and shifts her attention back to the lesson. Decalain continues explaining magic circles and how small adjustments can alter spells. He demonstrates a technique called flowing fire, showing how 2 strokes can change the color of flames. As he presents his research notes, Aferin remains deep in thought, certain that something about this situation isn't as simple as it seems. Professor Woojin's lectures were unlike anything the students had experienced before. Unlike Decalain, who used his position to boast, Woojin's lessons were mesmerizing. He used mana to bring magic theories to life, making even the most complex ideas easy to understand. The students, including Sylvia, were astonished. Once a prodigy who had lost her love for learning, Sylvia found herself captivated for the first time in years. As Woojin demonstrated, he altered a basic water summoning circle by merging it with a fire magic circle. The flames began to flow like water, a sight none of the students had ever imagined possible. Shock rippled through the classroom. Sylvia, in disbelief, struggled to accept what she was seeing. For most prodigious mages, magic was instinctual, not something learned through rigid theories. To her, theory was just a mold, an inefficient way to grasp magic that hindered real training. Yet, here was Woojin proving otherwise, challenging everything she thought she knew. Meanwhile, Aferin left the lecture deep in thought. It was completely different from the rumors she had heard about Woojin. For the first time, she had been fully engaged in a lesson. As she returned to her dorm, irritation flickered across her face. Graffiti covered her door. Yet another prank, getting worse ever since her conflict with Sylvia. She sighed, preparing to clean it, when she noticed an envelope beneath her door. Picking it up, she found a sponsorship certificate inside. Her initial reaction was disbelief. There was no way it could be real. She was hated by both Decalain and Alate, so why would anyone sponsor her? Deciding to report it as a forgery, she marched to the magical administration office. However, when the professor examined the seal, he confirmed its authenticity. The realization hit her like a wave. Someone had recognized her potential. Overwhelmed with emotion, she returned to her dorm. Sitting at her desk, she pinched her cheeks, hoping to wake up from what felt like a dream. She couldn't contain her joy, yet paranoia crept in. What if others found out? What if someone tried to take advantage of her newfound wealth? She hastily considered packing an emergency suitcase, regretting her visit to the office, where a girl had given her a strange look. Was she after her money? No, that was ridiculous. Aferin shook her head, trying to calm herself, but as relief washed over her, tears welled up in her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she felt genuinely happy. Someone had acknowledged her. Maybe the world wasn't so cruel after all.